Hello, fiber friends. My name is Brian. This is the Wool to Gold podcast, and I am drowning in fleece. So I'm not complaining about drowning in fleece. I thought this would be a very different video coming back to you guys from Rhinebeck, but honestly, I really just want to talk about my raw fleeces. That's where I want to start. And I decided that when it comes to this channel, I'm going to have two different types of like category of podcasts. So some of my podcast episodes are going to be super educational. You guys are going to learn a lot. And then some of them are going to be a little bit more chaotic and casual because that is just the kind of person I am. I really love the energy and respect the energy that Tashi from Stitches and Starlight brings to her podcast. And so if you guys are here for like the fiber rambles and just like what goes on in my chaotic mind before I do all of the intense research that you guys see later on, stick around. It's gonna be a fun one. I have two fleeces. I think we need to start with the CVM because I have just so many good things to say about the CVM. But before we do that, I need to get this Coriel cross off of my bed. It's 9 pounds. It's 9 pounds of Cori. I won't say exactly how much I paid for the Cori because it is my what I would consider my budget fleece. I'd like to keep that to myself. I'll spill the deets on how much the CVM cost me per pound. This cost me less than $10 per pound. That's what I'll say. And that for Cori cross of this quality, I honestly think is pretty good. It says mild cotting, but I'll show you guys later. This is like not even what I would consider cotting. I honestly think this is just like a really dirty sheep, and if I bathe it, that a lot of this so-called cotting or felting will come apart, but that's just a theory as of right now. We'll come back to that. I know that some of you are definitely coming to this video today hoping I'm gonna walk through all of the projects I plan on doing with my acquisitions from New York Sheep and Wool, the other acquisitions, and I promise I will get to that. Maybe it'll be a part of this video. Maybe I'll just make this an extra long podcast this week. We're gonna see how I feel. If you follow me on TikTok and you came to me through TikTok, you know I had a little bit of a health scare on the drive back from Rhinebeck, so I'm still recovering from that a little bit. Luckily, wool is soft and comforting and fun. So that's what we're doing today. All right, so this CVM fleece, I don't think I have a name on this fleece. However, I had to really dig around in my Cori Cross fleece in order to find a name tag for it. So maybe it'll come up when I pull this apart for washing. So this fleece is from Greene County Wool. They did have the Shave 'em to Save 'em passport symbol just sort of like sticking up with all the rest of the information. I totally believe that if I got this tested myself, this would be a 20 micron fleece. Hell, I would believe if it was less than 20 microns. This is so incredibly soft. I knew I wanted a gray or brown fleece going in. I wanted a natural color, and this CVM, this silver gray, this is just, I'm a winter, so I really think that this color is going to look fantastic on me. I personally like the variation, so it lost points in uniformity, and I think part of that has to do with the lack of uniformity in the color. However, I don't really care. And I say lost a few points and was less expensive, as some of you already know. I paid $136 for almost 4 pounds. It's 3 pounds 14 ounces, which is again almost 4 pounds. That's not the worst price when it comes to finer wools, especially compared to some of the merino fleeces I saw there. This was kind of a steal. I really think I got a beautiful quality fleece here, and I plan on turning this into a sweater. That is the end destination for all of this wool. I do think that of the two fleeces, this will be the fleece that I wash first, especially just because it's smaller, it's easier to manage, and I want the end product of this as soon as possible so that I can start this sweater as soon as possible. If you've been following along with my Rhinebeck haul on TikTok, you already know I did not pick up a sweater's quantity of yarn. I in fact bought no yarn at New York Sheep and Wool. Once I've finished cleaning this fleece, I am planning on combing most of it. I might card a sample just to see how it turns out. However, the game plan is to comb most of it with these new combs, These are BAM Fiberworks combs, which I hadn't heard of, but honestly, they were the only combs that I saw being sold that I liked the construction of. One of the reasons I like the construction is because their covers are magnetic. I think it'll help me not lose them. These are also specifically fine wool combs. They are single row, stainless steel, yeah, and magnetic covers. And again, these are from Fiber Kingdom, I think it's called. I know I have the slip somewhere around here. Gosh, you'd think I'd pre-organize these things, but I don't. Again, this is gonna be kind of a chaos episode, so hope you guys are chaos gremlins like me. Okay, yes, I was right. So Fiber Kingdom in New York. I'll definitely give an in-depth review of these once I've used them a fair amount. I've never used combs before, but I don't love commercial combed prep. If you came to this channel from my TikTok, you already know I'm not a huge fan of commercial comb prep. I just don't like spinning from it. It's not what makes my heart sing. Everybody has different preferences. It's just not my preference. But then I was listening to Tashi from Stitches and Starlight, and I love her because she also enables so much of my fiber addiction. And she was talking about how spinning from hand combed prep is so different from spinning from commercial combed top. Like, it's a totally different experience. And that just really motivated me, honestly, to pick up combs. I saw Taylor Owen while I was buying this CVM fleece in line too, and if I wasn't already sold on Fate telling me I needed to buy combs, I feel like she is the combing queen, okay? So I bought combs for Taylor and for Tashi. I'm going to give them a try, and I'll put both of their channels down below so that if you don't already follow them and watch all of their videos, you can binge all of them while you prep fiber too. And I will give you a review as soon as I can. Okay, so I've brought Frost, the Corey Cross, up. Here is that name card that I said I had to dig out from the can you tell it was at the bottom of the fleece bag? I feel like you can. So as you can see, a lot of different colors going on here. I do think if I had to estimate, I wasn't provided with an age for this sheep, but there is some gray kind of mixed in throughout. She is a variety of light chocolate, some like almost camel brown that I feel like the camera is kind of picking up a little bit, and then some really, really dark brown as well. So there's a lot of variety in color. I think she's going to make a really beautiful heathered yarn. I also plan on making her into a sweater, but the thing about 9 pounds is even after this is cleaned, right? So once it's cleaned and washed, we're gonna lose some grease weight on both of these fleeces. Probably a little bit less though on the Corey, because Corey is less of a fine wool and more of a medium wool. However, we'll still lose some weight. Not enough though, not enough. If you're not familiar, 8 pounds. I mean, imagine if you had 8 pounds of yarn, you know, that's a lot of yardage. She'll become a sweater, but she'll probably become some other things. I'm really tossing the idea around of making a small felted rug out of her, or seat cover or some kind of thing. I think just for myself, I don't know, felting is a lot more work than I think people realize, and I feel like for the amount that I would feel comfortable charging for how much labor goes into my felted rugs, I don't know. A lot of the times I like to keep them to myself. Maybe that'll change in the future. I thought I'd want to sell one, but then every time I finish making one, I'm like, oh, I want to keep it. Like, because it looks like a sheep. Why would I not want more things that just resemble sheep in my life? You know what I mean? You can see, I wanted to talk a little bit about why she cost a little bit less money. So I talked about the lack of uniformity in color. Again, I don't really mind that. I think that's really, for me, that's an appealing aspect of the fleece. It's why so many people love buying Jacob fleeces. But again, different strokes for different folks, you know what I mean? I'm super happy to have gotten this fleece. And then I wanted to talk a little bit about cotting and what cotting means and why you really should. So again, it depends on who is reviewing your fleece, right? If the person who is judging the fleece at the contest is really they don't care about the fiber at all. They're not a hand spinner. They don't know anything about like fiber and what spinners want from fiber, then you can definitely put less stock in these scores. However, I still think they're going to write interesting notes on the scorecard. And here on my notes, it says mild cotting needs some skirting. So let's talk about what that means. Other fleece was coated, so it had a blue dot as well, and it was skirted. So it was coated and skirted, which means when I paid for the fleece, I'm not paying for, or I'm paying for much less essentially like garbage weight or trash weight. So the VM, the gross bits that I'm just gonna throw out from the fleece, the pieces that I would skirt off. So that's what needs some skirting refers to. It's one of the reasons again that this fleece was a lot less expensive actually, because it needs to still have some of the gross parts removed. I'll do the skirting myself. I've skirted a fleece before. I do think it can be a little intimidating for beginners, because if you've never skirted a fleece before, you might just not know where to start, but I'll be showing you guys the skirting process of this fleece for sure. Then what does coating and a coated and uncoated fleece mean? So sometimes if a shepherd or shepherdess has hand spinners in mind, they will coat their fleeces, which means they put literal coats over the sheep. Now this can be a really expensive investment for the shepherd or shepherdess, because they need to switch out these coats as the sheep grows and the fleece gets bigger, or else the ends will get cotted or felted. I mentioned earlier in the video that, listen, there's some areas here that are definitely a bit cotted, but I also think that part of it is just the dirt and the mud kind of like holding everything together. And I think with some washing and light processing, a lot of this so-called cotting will come apart. But I am just gonna pull out a lock here to kind of just show you an example. So down here is nice and floofy and fluffy, and if you come up here and you pull these apart, they're kind of a little bit stuck together. A little bit tangled, a little bit felted, a little bit cotted. But again, as I'm pulling them to get away from each other, I feel like a lot of the dirt is what is holding these locks together. And so I am very honestly unbothered and unconcerned about processing this fleece and running into issues with the cotting. I don't think it'll be that difficult to overcome, and I think I will get a lot of super duper high quality soft yarn out of this. I do think if I had to make a guess as to what this Corriedale was crossed with, I'd say it was probably a fine wool, just because of the crimp and overall structure and the amount of lanolin in this Corrie. Not to say some Corrie can't be extremely fine, but I do think that this was probably a cross with a fine wool. But again, this is my budget fleece. I really just fell in love with the color and frankly the price, and I really just think that it was priced in a way that is a steal for the quality of fiber that I'm getting. Just because this sheep is getting older and some of its hairs are graying, I really don't notice any coarseness in any of these gray portions either. That is something you sometimes have to worry about as the sheep ages. It's not just that some spinners want uniformity of color and no gray hairs mixed in with their dark brown or whatever color of fiber they have. Sometimes it also comes down to the fact that these gray hairs are at a higher micron count. Now, this is not true for all sheep. It's not even true for all sheep breeds. You can have two sheep within the same flock where some, as they go gray, will get coarser and others will not. It really depends on that individual sheep and their genetics, so it just comes down to you as a hand spinner feeling confident in reaching into a bag and knowing what you're getting. So on that point, I did want to talk a little bit about my experiences at fleece sales, my advice at fleece sales, why I recommend you get there early. So at New York Sheep and Wool, I did notice that by 11 a.m., in my opinion, most of the best fleeces had already been purchased. I did notice there were still a few very nice fleeces there. I will say they were the ones that were probably the priciest. Not all of them, but just some of them. Now, if you're willing to do the work and rehab certain fleeces, again, some of those were still there. I do invite some of those fleeces into my collection. However, I tend to do that at Maryland Sheep and Wool. I do think that because Maryland sheep and wool is in the spring, it does have a higher variety of fleeces available from different types of sheep. Some sheep can be shorn twice a year, but some of them are not. So a lot of the fleeces that are from sheep that are not shorn twice a year at New York Sheep and Wool are ones that have just not sold yet or were maybe shorn a little bit later in the season. Not to say that there weren't, again, beautiful quality fleeces. I came home with two. But I do think that there is a slightly higher variety of fleece and just more fleece in general at the Maryland Sheep and Wool Show. In both cases, I think if you want like pick of the litter, you need to show up early. I always show up early. I'm a little bit competitive in the fleece tent. I had a few followers who they said they saw me in the fleece tent, but they waited until after the fact to come and talk to me because I think a lot of us, we get in there and we know what we're looking for, or we want to sort through as many fleeces as quickly as possible. I remember my first fleece sale, I was so overwhelmed and intimidated by all the other spinners, but now I just push my way in because I'm not there for the merino anyway, and that's what a lot of people are like pushing and shoving for. So I just, go about my merry way. A lot of the times I bring an IKEA bag so I can throw the fleeces in. Especially this year I ended up bringing home one that was 9 pounds, so I definitely needed the IKEA bag to help. And, if you have a supportive friend who's not going to get like freaked while being in there, bring a friend. I wish more people would go and experience the fleece sale, honestly, and like stick their hands in some raw fleece, respectfully, of course. Again, you really shouldn't disturb the fleece too much when you're going in. I have pulled locks from both of my fleeces that were like the initial locks that I pulled just to do the test. But let's talk a little bit about like fleece etiquette too when you're approaching a fleece and what you can do to actually judge a fleece when you're just like glancing at it. So I already mentioned all of the notes. You can look at what it's been rated and its score. Maybe it's an award winner, maybe it's not. Plenty of great fleeces I have talked about have come from me completely ignoring the scorecard. I absolutely love the $16 down fleece that I picked up at Maryland Sheep and Wool. I think that there are lots of great affordable fleeces. However, when you put a little bit more money into a fleece, you definitely get that return in terms of needing to do less work in preparing the fiber and just the overall quality of the fiber. I have talked about how both of these fleeces definitely pass the ping test. And you know what? Let's bring out some locks and I'll show you how to do a ping test. So these are both the initial samples that I pulled. So normally when you come up to a fleece, it's going to be kind of like rolled up, right? And you can open it up and unroll it a little bit gently, right? To just look through, make sure you know what you're getting yourself into. Look in and make sure that there is no, I have mentioned scurf in the past. Make sure that you don't see any scurf as you're sort of like moving the fleece around and looking inside of it. Now, a lot of the times at the top, sometimes there will be a lock just set aside from another spinner. If not, you're going to take one kind of, from the top edge. You don't want to take one from like deep in the center like I did to show you the cotting until you've actually purchased the fleece and it's yours. That is just the respectful thing to do. One of the reasons that is because a lot of the times these fleece are rolled up in a way that when spinners like me unroll it to skirt it, we can tell which part of the fleece which was on which part of the sheep. What I mean by that is that some sheep get a little bit coarser hair, or a lot of sheep end up with more VM on their stomachs and obviously near their back ends. And so knowing where the leg and tummy parts of the fleece are just make it easier for us to sort of separate out the icky bits. So that's why we don't like to disrupt the fleece too much. That's why it's rolled up in the way that it is rolled up. Just again, keep this in mind while you're testing the fleece. And so you're gonna pull out a lock and you're gonna inspect it. You're gonna see, do we see any scurf? No, we do not. Do we like the color? Yes, we do. Is it next to skin soft? For me, absolutely. There's no prickle factor. And then the ping test. So you're going to take it between your hands, and I'm going to try to get the sound as clear as possible here. That is what good wool should sound like. It also sounds like this. So that's a ping test. If you hear a bunch of crackling, a bunch of breaking, that might mean that there is a break in the fleece, or it is not a very strong fleece. That sheep might have been under some stress, or it might have been impregnated and not shorn in time for the pregnancy to not affect the fleece. There are a lot of factors that can affect the overall strength of a fleece. Some of them are well within control of the shepherd, some of them are not. But it is worth keeping in mind if you are looking to make something that is going to last a lifetime, or at least your lifetime. It's important to do a ping test as well, because if it's an exceptionally weak fleece, pieces are going to start breaking off as you are carding it. So I love to do carded prep. I mentioned I'm most likely going to do combed prep for both of these fleeces, but I am going to probably card up a very small sample of both of them just to see how that carded prep looks. And if they were weak fleeces and I started to card them, these pieces are going to break off and form little neps, kind of like second cuts would. Now, I bring up second cuts as well because this is something else that you need to be looking for when you are looking at a fleece. Some fleece, again, are shorn with hand spinners in mind, and some fleece are not shorn with hand spinners in mind. The ones that are not shorn with hand spinners in mind will come at a lower price, and a lot of the times that's because, again, there is more of a work investment. But the ones that are shorn with hand spinners in mind often will not have second cuts, which is essentially shorter bits of the fleece that were missed the first time the shear went over the sheep. You don't want second cuts because, again, just like weak pieces of a fleece that are breaking off, they will cause neps and little pieces in the fiber that you as a spinner might end up wanting to remove, and it's just, again, one more step of labor you have to go through in order to prepare your fiber. Now, my game plan as it stands when it comes to processing this fleece will definitely be to do it in, I think, chunks as opposed to a whole fleece. Like, I'll be processing the CBM. I just think that with this much poundage, it's a little bit intimidating for me to try to realistically wash and process the whole thing in a reasonable time span. This will definitely be a possibly year-long endeavor. But if you're along for the ride, hopefully you'll get to see Frost the sheep from start to finish. Before I continue with this episode, it's probably a good point to plug all of my other socials and other ways that you can support me. So I do have an Instagram at Brian Koshan. You can follow me on TikTok at Wool to Gold. And if you don't already know, I do have a shop where I sell some of my hand spun and some hand processed fiber. I do think that some of Frost may eventually end up in that shop. So if you are interested in processing some of Frost yourself, or using some of her carded or combed fiber that I might prepare, keep me in mind, give me a follow. So moving on with just fiber talk, let's talk about plans for the fall. And just Rhinebeck in general, because that is where I got these fleeces. So Rhinebeck was so much fun. I talked a lot on my TikTok about the fact that I had a lot of really moving experiences with some really important historical people when it comes to spinning while I was at Rhinebeck. And I plan on making a lot of future content where I actually do interviews with those people. I have some really great contacts at Solitude Wool as well. We're going to be doing some interviews, guys. We're going to be talking to some older spinners and talking about some of the history of spinning. For those of you who don't know about the history of spinning, spinning really had a renaissance in the 60s and 70s here in the US. And Straw to Gold by Susan Drudding, I never know how to pronounce her name. He is a really big inspiration of mine and part of the reason that this is called the Wool to Gold channel. And I would just like to know more about the shenanigans that her and Alden Amos and Celia Quinn got up to before any of us were born. I am interested, and it's history that I'm afraid is going to not get recorded. It's really interesting too because a lot of that fiber history movement and those people I'm talking about were also really big people in the civil rights movement on the West Coast. So I think the overlap in history is fascinating, and I hope to get to record more of that for you guys. But today I'm not going to be talking about those super cool interviews. I am going to be talking about some of my acquisitions from Rhinebeck and what I'm actually planning on doing with them. Some of them I have plans for, or I purposefully bought to complete my breed study, and others I'm not really sure. So if you have suggestions, drop them in the comments. So since I already showed off my new combs from them, I am going to start with my acquisitions from Fiber Kingdom. I did want to mention that besides my combs, I am going to save the rest of the equipment purchases that I got from Rhinebeck for the next episode when I go through just all of my spinning equipment except for the spinning wheels. In the last episode, we already covered spinning wheels, my spinning wheels, and their anatomy. So in the next episode, I'm going to be covering things like whirls, nitty-knotties, orifice hooks, all of the accessories that you might not know are also necessary in making yarn. So Fiber Kingdom purchases, I do have this 4 ounces of dark Coopworth. I don't see a ton of natural colored Coopworth, and I did want to add some Coopworth to my collection. I just thought this would be a nice add-on to a purchase that I was already making. And then the only other fiber I got from them is the Cheviot top. This is 2 ounces, and I do plan on using this to blend into some of my coarser fibers to perhaps make them a little bit softer. I'm really interested in getting into blending some of these more niche breeds to help bring certain characteristics to my yarn. I think that's where I am moving forward in my breed study. I'd like to get into some of that, and so that's what I'm going to be using just this white Cheviot top for. So next up, I wanted to talk about Wellspring Farms, my very first yarn that I ever made out of Jacob Roving. It was their roving that I made it out of, so I wanted to make another trip to them because I felt like I needed more fiber from them that I made into better yarn. The fiber was really beautiful. I have no regrets making my first yarn out of it. It was so beautiful, again, that it motivated me to actually take that plunge and turn it into yarn, even if it wasn't my proudest yarn or my most beautiful yarn. So I picked up some East Frisian fiber from them. Okay, so the thing about Frisians is that they are a tri-purpose breed, right? And as someone who's really into sheep, I find it very hard to believe when any breed claims to be even dual purpose. A lot of the times they do one thing a little bit better than the other. Like, right, if it's meat and fiber, their fiber is really soft, but the meat it's all right. And like caracal meat is so delicious, but their fiber has some prickle qualities that are great for certain projects and not great for other projects. There is no bad wool, there is no bad yarn. It's just matching the projects to the right yarn. That being said, this East Frisian, oh, I'm going to turn this into a hat. I got 2 ounces of it. I am just so impressed. So the East Frisian is known for producing a decent amount of milk, its meat, and its fiber. I don't think I've ever actually gotten to feel East Frisian. This was the only vendor at Rhinebeck that I think had East Frisian fiber. So obviously I had to scoop it up. And then as I was over there, I did see, I just needed it. I needed it for the colors. I'm usually not crazy about yellow, but this blue turquoise was awesome. And this is a Tunis and Navajo churro blend. And honestly, it's really soft too. I don't know if these would necessarily go together in a hat once they're spun up, but they are both soft enough that I would probably wear them as a hat or at minimum a scarf. But I do think these are some fantastic acquisitions. I look forward to spinning these up. Alright, so we are going to take a break from natural colored fibers and roving, and we are going to dive into some of the dyed braids that I got. So I only got 2 dyed braids because, again, I'm not usually crazy about combed top. However, I did want to add some Targhee to my collection. This is a dyed Targhee braid from Forage Colors, who I did not know, but honestly had a lot of amazing dyes, and I would absolutely go back to. I mean, I am going to see how some of these darker portions end up spinning up Sometimes when you have really intense dyes like these, there can be felting, but I am not going to say that there is felting before I have actually spun it. It is just one of those things that I do look out for. So I'll give a review on this braid once it's actually spun up, but the colors are amazing and it feels so soft and squishy. Love Targhee. I've really only gotten to spin one other sample of Targhee and it was white, but I had fun, so I think this will be a lot of fun too. And then this braid, I mean, again, it's surprising I ended up with any dyed braids, but especially because this is a Rambouillet dyed braid, which I'm not, if you know me, you know I'm not crazy about the fine wools. However, the reason this Rambouillet called to me is this colorway is very me. I love all of these colors. I love blue and brown together especially, and with just a little bit of green, that's like my whole color scheme. But I also got it because it is from Four Hearts Farm, mainly fiber, and it's US dyed and sourced, which is really the reason that I kind of made the exception for it. And I was like, you know what, I'm going to get it because I do really appreciate US sourced fibers. I just believe in supporting your local fiber shed, and this is a great way to do it. Next up are my acquisitions from the Good Shepherd. So I was very tempted because I ended up getting some equipment that is going to make it a little bit easier to spin cotton on my shaft. I will leave it at that. I won't say anything more. But because of that, you guys know I love natural colored fibers. So they had this cotton sample pack, and I want to pull out the actual, I cannot pronounce this for the life of me, Fleeces cotton sample pack. So these colors, they're natural colored cotton. This one's called Sea Mist. It looks a lot yellower here, but it's honestly more of like kind of a greenish color. Then you have this like really rusty color, this dark brown, and this traditional like kind of cream white. I don't usually love cotton, but natural colored non-GMO cotton has always kind of piqued my interest. A lot of it does have to be imported, but I'm interested in the stuff that is grown here in the US, and I do know that this stuff was grown in California. I'm super excited to spin that up. And then I did get something that I didn't see any other Rhinebeck seller have. So there was a lot of silk top, and silk top is great, but I've been really curious about other silk preparations. So if you know, you know, these are silk caps. I'll do a whole tutorial on how to actually use these and take these apart, but I just think this colorway, stunning. I'm going to be blending it with the next thing that I'm going to be showing you. But before we move on to that, this is the other silk cap I got in lilac because I look good in this shade of purple. Again, I'm a winter, and I just think blending this into some other fiber that is maybe a little bit coarser, but I want to be in more of a next to skin garment. I think if I blend in a little silk, it could really help with the prickle factor of things. Really looking forward to using these. Now, what am I going to be blending this with, you might ask? One of my favorite fiber providers, Ross Farm Fibers. So they are definitely a little bit pricier. However, in terms of great, reliable prep when it comes to rare wools, I don't know if they can be beaten by many other providers. They are a wonderful resource. As you can see, this is Black Welsh Mountain. Now, Black Welsh Mountain can definitely range in its micron count, but this, just like the other Black Welsh Mountain that I got, has a pretty soft hand. And so what I'm planning on doing is blending a little bit of this silk into this Black Welsh Mountain to get like a speckled, maybe heathered type of effect. I'm not really sure. I think it's going to be beautiful though. And then my only other acquisition from Ross Farm is, and this might come as a surprise to some of you because you know how I feel about US sourced wool. I really do try to source most of my collection from the US. However, I have gotten to try one other sample of Castle Milk Moret before. It's a really, really fun fiber to spin. It's not exceptionally dissimilar from Colored Ryland, which is notoriously my favorite breed from the UK. It can be really hard to find Colored Ryland, so this Castle Milk Moret is going to have to substitute. But I just love breeds like this, or even the Kent Romney that can just stand up to like swamp type environments really well and still have really nice fiber. I don't know, there's something about it. They're kind of down-like, at least in my opinion, and they're like the CBM where they can get really fine depending on where you're sourcing from. So I picked up some of that, and I'm definitely looking forward to spinning up just this really nice chestnutty brown. It's going to be a wonderful time. Now, I don't necessarily have super specific plans for either of these. What I think they might end up being is colorwork accent skeins for some of my sweaters that I'm planning on making. I'm not exactly sure if that's where they will actually end up, but that's my plan for them as of right now. I just really love these two breeds, and I think I'd like to have them represented as like a stripe or something in a sweater. I just haven't really settled on any designs for my sweaters quite yet, so I hope you guys enjoyed coming along with me for my little fiber acquisition walkthrough from Rhinebeck. If you went to Rhinebeck, I hope you had fun. What did you get? What was your favorite thing that you got? Which one was your favorite sheep that you saw? We all took a ton of pictures with the sheep, so I know you have a favorite. And thank you for coming and hanging out for the third episode of the Wool to Gold podcast. Again, next week we'll be talking about different types of equipment that I have that come along with owning a spinning wheel. And I'll be going through some of my equipment acquisitions from Rhinebeck, walking through what a whirl is, different flyers, what they can do for you in terms of making different types of yarn, all of those fun things. If you don't already follow me on Instagram and TikTok, I'll have those linked below. If you don't already follow me on TikTok and Instagram, I'll link those below. And I'll see you guys on the next episode of the Wool to Gold podcast.